Hello everyone, I am Professor Jaishree Premkumar and I am your instructor for this video lecture which is on the difference between listening and hearing and also on cultivation of good listening skills. Okay, so to begin with, if you look for meaning of listening in dictionary along with words such as heeding, paying attention to, you will also find that hearing is considered to be a synonym of listening. Confusing, right? Because here we have a lecture on difference between listening and hearing, and dictionary tells us that both are same meaning words. And in our day-to-day life conversations too, we use both the words simultaneously, right? Okay, so having spoken about confusion related to listening and hearing, let us now talk about what we mean when we refer to communication skills. So when we say communication skills, can you tell me what comes to your mind? Yes, you're right. When we talk about communication skill, we talk about skills related to verbal and non-verbal communication and which includes listening, speaking, reading and writing. We do not speak about hearing in terms of communication skill. So in terms of communication skill to be acquired or to be cultivated, we speak of listening skill and not of hearing skill. I hope now it is clear that listening is considered to be one of the skills of communication, which means that it can be learned or acquired in order to have an effective communication. Okay, so having understood listening in terms of one of the important communication skills, we'll now see some other major differences between hearing and listening, which will make it clear to you that both are completely different activities. Okay, so let us begin with hearing. Hearing is simply the process of understanding sounds through ears. Our ears pick up sounds and send them to our brain, and then these sounds are recognized as speech or music. So, without us realizing it, hearing happens throughout the day. Take, for example, when we wake up in the morning, we may hear the birds singing outside the window, and we may or may not focus on that singing. Similarly, in a crowded room, many a times we hear the sound of people talking and laughing all around us without making out exactly what is being said. So, in all these cases, what do you think is happening? Yes, you're right. This is called as hearing, but it does not necessarily amount to listening. So, you must have noticed that when it comes to hearing, it does not take any efforts, or in other words, it is a passive activity which happens as purely a physical process. Now we will see what is meant by listening and why it is said that listening is different from hearing. First of all, listening is an active process because we need to give our full attention to the person in order to understand what that person is trying to say. So, in order to focus fully on what is being said, we try to avoid all distractions or barriers, which means that we make conscious efforts to make our communication effective, right? So, we can say that listening is an intellectual activity as it needs efforts and attention and removal of all distractions and barriers. Also, now can you tell me another important point which you must have noticed from our discussion on difference between hearing and listening? Yes, it is quite clear from our discussion till now that listening requires hearing, but hearing does not require listening. Right. I hope now it is clear that listening and hearing are two different activities, and in order to have an effective communication, one needs to be a good listener and not a good hearer. Right. So, this takes us to our next topic, which is cultivation of good listening skills. Okay, so let us now see how one can develop good listening skill, or in other words, how one can be a good listener. So, the first important point to remember in order to be a good listener is to pay attention. That is, to give the speaker your undivided attention and acknowledge the speaker's message. Most importantly, remember that non-verbal communication also speaks loudly. You can thus use your body language and gestures to show that you are an active listener. For example, you can use occasional nod, smile, or use other suitable facial expressions to let the speaker know that you are actively involved in listening to what he or she is saying. Okay? Also, in order to be a focused listener, you should put aside all distractions such as unnecessary papers, a pile of books, and most importantly, your mobile phone, right? Next important point to remember to be an effective listener is to provide feedback to the speaker. Okay, now providing feedback is very important because the listener needs to understand that by providing occasional feedback to the speaker is a way to let the speaker know that you are an active listener. And that way, the speaker can be motivated in his or her communication. The occasional feedback can be given in ways such as paraphrasing speaker statements and by asking questions to clarify whatever points you feel need clarification. However, remember to keep in mind that you should ask questions that pertains to your understanding of the topic rather than ask a question about something that is not related to the main idea that the speaker is trying to get across. The next important point is do not interrupt. Okay, so you need to remember as an active listener that though providing feedback is important, it does not mean that you should interrupt the speaker. Can you guess why interrupting the speaker is considered to be a negative feature in terms of good listening? Yes, you guessed it right. Interrupting is a waste of time. It frustrates the speaker and it limits full understanding of the message. So remember to allow the speaker to finish each sentence or each point before asking questions and do not interrupt with counter argument. Okay. The last and the most important point to take into account in order to be an effective listener is to remember that active listening is designed to encourage respect and understanding, right? You are getting information and perspective as an active listener, right? So you will add nothing by verbally attacking the speaker. So, how can you respond appropriately? Can you tell me some points? Yes, you can do it by being open and honest in your response. At the same time, you can do it by asserting your opinions respectfully. And most importantly, by treating the other person in a way that you would like to be treated if you were in that person's place. In other words, you need to empathize with the speaker because your empathy would make the speaker more comfortable to express his or her views, right? Okay, so with this, we conclude this video lecture. In our next lecture, we'll discuss problems or barriers to listening, which is the last part of this unit. Thank you for your attention.